The night was darker than usual, the kind where even the stars seemed to hide. Rain poured down in sheets, pounding against the windshield of Ethan's old pickup truck as he drove along the empty rural highway. His twin daughters, Mia and Lily, were asleep in the back seat, their little heads resting against each other, wrapped in a blanket that had seen better days. The soft sound of their breathing was the only thing keeping Ethan calm as his wipers squeaked rhythmically across the glass. He had worked a double shift again that day, first as a mechanic, then as a part-time delivery driver. Bills never seemed to stop piling up, and being a single dad meant every dollar had to stretch farther than it ever should. Still, when he looked at his daughters in the rearview mirror, he smiled. They were his world, his reason for everything. Then, as his headlights cut through the rain, something appeared on the side of the road, a flicker of movement, barely visible. At first, Ethan thought it was an animal, but then, through the rain, he saw it, a woman, stumbling along the shoulder, soaked to the bone, clutching her arm. Her car was half submerged in a ditch nearby, smoke rising from the crumpled hood. Without a second thought, Ethan slowed down and pulled over. "Stay in the truck, girls," he said gently. "Dad'll be right back." He stepped out into the storm, the cold rain hitting him like needles. As he approached, the woman tried to wave him off weakly, her face pale and shivering. "It's okay. I'm fine," she said, though her voice trembled. "No, you're not," Ethan replied firmly. "You're hurt. Come on, let's get you out of the rain." He guided her toward the truck, holding his jacket over her head. When she hesitated, he noticed the blood trickling from a cut on her forehead and the limp in her step. "I'll take you to the nearest hospital," he said. She looked at him, uncertain, almost afraid, as if she wasn't used to people stopping to help. But Ethan's tone was steady, kind, and there was something about the warmth in his eyes that made her nod. He opened the passenger door and helped her in. The girl stirred at the sound, blinking sleepily. "Daddy, who's that?" Lily mumbled. "A lady who needs our help," Ethan said softly. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart." The woman glanced at the twins and smiled faintly despite her pain. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "Yeah," Ethan said with quiet pride, starting the truck again. "They take after their mom." There was a pause, the kind that held more than words could say. As the truck rumbled back onto the road, the rain grew even heavier. Ethan's old tires struggled for grip, and he had to squint through the blur of rain and headlights. "Thank you," she said suddenly, her voice barely audible. "You didn't have to stop." Ethan shrugged. "Couldn't just leave someone out there in the storm." "What's your name?" "Clara," she said, wincing as she shifted her arm. "Clara Hart. Nice to meet you, Clara." "I'm Ethan," he replied. "Hold tight. Hospital's about 15 minutes away." She nodded, staring out the window as raindrops streamed down like silver lines. In the dim light of the dashboard, Ethan noticed her hands, delicate, manicured, not the kind of hands used to hard labor or long drives in the middle of nowhere. Her coat looked expensive too, though now it was torn and soaked. Something about her didn't quite fit here. She looked like someone from a different world. But Ethan didn't ask questions. He just drove. As they neared the small-town hospital, Clara's head began to nod. She was exhausted, fighting to stay awake. "Almost there," Ethan said reassuringly. By the time they reached the emergency entrance, he had already called ahead. He jumped out, helped her through the rain, and waved to the nurse inside. They rushed her in, and Ethan stood there, dripping wet, not realizing how cold he'd gotten. Mia and Lily peeked from the truck window, their little faces pressed to the glass. "Daddy, is she gonna be okay?" Mia called softly. Ethan turned and smiled tiredly. "She will be, honey. Thanks to you two letting me stop." The nurse came back a few minutes later. "She'll be fine, sir. You did the right thing bringing her here." Ethan nodded, relieved. "Can you tell her I'll check in tomorrow? Just want to make sure she's all right." "Of course," the nurse said with a smile. As he walked back to the truck, Ethan didn't think much of it. He had done what anyone decent would do, right? But as the rain finally began to fade and the clouds started to break, he had no idea. The woman he had just saved wasn't just anyone. She was someone whose life and fortune would soon collide with his in a way that would change everything. Morning came slowly, with thin rays of light breaking through the rain clouds that had spent the night weeping over the town. Ethan stood in the small kitchen of his modest home, an old farmhouse with creaky floors and chipped counters, flipping pancakes for Mia and Lily. The smell of butter filled the air, mingling with laughter as the twins sang their made-up breakfast song. For a moment, everything felt normal again, peaceful. But Ethan's thoughts kept drifting back to the woman from last night. Clara Hart. Something about her had lingered in his mind. Not just her face or the way she'd said thank you in that trembling voice, but the quiet sadness behind her eyes. The kind of sadness people carried when they were lost. He didn't know why it bothered him so much, but it did. "Daddy." Lily's tiny voice snapped him back. She sat at the table, holding up her pancake proudly. I made a smiley face. Ethan chuckled, placing another plate down. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Looks better than the ones I make." Mia giggled. "Because yours always burn." "Hey." Ethan grinned, feigning offense. "I'll have you know your old man's a professional pancake chef." Their laughter filled the room, the kind of sound that makes a house feel alive. After breakfast, as the girls started drawing at the table, Ethan checked the time. He had a delivery shift later, but something inside him whispered that he should go check on Clara before work. "Girls," he said gently, crouching down, "Daddy needs to go out for a little while. You can stay with Mrs. Brooks next door." "Okay." They nodded, used to the routine. By the time Ethan reached the hospital, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp and shining under the pale morning sun. He walked through the sliding doors, carrying a small paper bag of muffins, the best his budget could offer. At the front desk, he asked, "Excuse me, I brought these for Clara Hart, the woman from last night's accident." The nurse smiled. "Ah, yes. She's awake now. Room 208. Ethan nodded, heart beating faster than he expected. Why was he nervous? It wasn't like this was anything more than checking in. But as he reached the door and peeked inside, he froze. Clara was sitting up in bed, sunlight streaming across her face. Her hair, now dry and brushed, shimmered like gold. She looked far more composed than the woman he'd pulled from the storm, elegant, almost regal in posture. On the bedside table were a phone and a designer handbag that looked worth more than his truck. He hesitated for a moment, then knocked softly. Clara turned her head, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Ethan," she said softly. "You came." He stepped in awkwardly, holding up the paper bag. "Brought you something. Not much, just muffins." She smiled, genuinely this time. "That's more than enough. Thank you." As he handed it over, she noticed his rough hands, still scratched from helping her last night. Her expression softened. "You really went out of your way for a stranger," she said quietly. Ethan shrugged. "You look like you needed help. That's what people should do for each other." She studied him for a moment, his worn jacket, his tired but kind eyes, and something about his simplicity felt grounding. "Real. I'm sorry about your car," he added. "If you want, I can take a look at it. I'm a mechanic." Clara blinked, then chuckled faintly. "You fix cars too?" "Fix, build, patch, whatever it takes to keep mine from falling apart," he said with a half-smile. That made her laugh, a soft, melodic sound that filled the sterile room with warmth. For a while, they just talked about small things. About how the storm came out of nowhere, about the twins, and how Mia wanted to be a space doctor and Lily dreamed of being a ballerina. Clara listened intently, her eyes glowing at the mention of his daughters. Then, as he was about to leave, she hesitated. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If you hadn't stopped last night, what would have happened to me?" she asked quietly. Ethan frowned. "I don't like to think about that, but I'm glad I did." Her eyes glistened. "You saved me, and I don't know how to repay that." "You don't have to," he said softly. "Just take care of yourself." As he left the room, Clara watched him go with a strange feeling twisting inside her chest, one she hadn't felt in a long time. For someone used to living in luxury, surrounded by people who wanted something from her, Ethan's kindness had been different. It was pure, genuine. When her assistant arrived later that afternoon, asking if she wanted to head home, Clara just stared out the window. "Not yet," she murmured. "I want to see him again." That evening, when Ethan came home from work, Mia and Lily ran to greet him. "Daddy, did you see the lady again?" He smiled faintly. "Yeah, she's doing better. Will she come visit us?" Lily asked innocently. Ethan chuckled. "I don't think so, honey. She's probably got her own life to get back to." But deep down, he wasn't so sure. There had been something in her eyes when he left, something unspoken. He couldn't shake it. And little did he know, Clara Hart was already making plans that would bring her back into his life, and his daughters, in ways he could never imagine. It had been 3 days since the storm. The skies were clear now, sunlight spilling softly across the quiet little town. Ethan had gone back to his usual routine, early mornings, long hours, tired evenings, but something inside him felt different. Every time he looked at the stretch of highway where he'd stopped that night, he couldn't help but wonder, what if he hadn't? Life, it seemed, had a strange way of leading you exactly where you needed to be, even if you didn't know it yet. That afternoon, Ethan was fixing a customer's car in the garage behind his house when he heard a car engine approaching. It wasn't the rumble of an old pickup or worn-down sedan like most cars in town. This one purred smoothly, expensive, polished. He wiped his hands with a rag and stepped out to the driveway. A sleek black Mercedes pulled up, sunlight glinting off its chrome trim. The kind of car that didn't belong on this side of town. And when the door opened, Ethan froze. Clara stepped out, no hospital gown this time, but an elegant beige coat, her hair falling gracefully over her shoulders. She smiled shyly, almost uncertainly, as if she wasn't sure she should be there. "Clara." Ethan blinked. "What are you?" "I wanted to see you," she said softly, closing the car door behind her, "and to say thank you properly." Before Ethan could respond, the front door of the house burst open. "Daddy, someone's here." Mia and Lily came running out, barefoot, faces smeared with chocolate, the laughter echoing down the driveway. When they saw Clara, they stopped mid-run, hiding behind their father shyly. Clara crouched down with a gentle smile. "You must be Mia and Lily," she said warmly. "Your dad told me all about you." The twins exchanged curious glances before Lily whispered, "You're the lady Daddy saved." Ethan sighed, amused. "Well, there goes my secret identity as a hero." Clara laughed, a genuine, bright laugh that even made the girls giggle. "I brought something for you," Clara said, opening her car door again. From the seat, she pulled out 2 small boxes wrapped in shiny blue paper. The girls' eyes widened. "Can we open them?" Mia asked, bouncing slightly. Ethan hesitated. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Clara interrupted softly. "Please." The twins tore into the boxes, gasping as they pulled out matching dolls, handmade, with tiny embroidered names on their dresses, Mia and Lily. "They have our names." Lily squealed. Clara smiled tenderly. "I had them made when I got home. I thought they deserved something special." For a moment, the scene was perfect. Sunlight, laughter, warmth. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something about all this didn't add up. The car, the coat, the gifts. This wasn't a woman struggling to make ends meet. She caught his gaze and smiled faintly. "You're wondering what someone like me is doing here, aren't you?" Ethan opened his mouth, but she continued before he could answer. "You're right. I don't exactly belong in this part of town." She took a deep breath. "I own a design firm in the city. I was heading to a meeting that night when the storm hit. I guess fate decided to reroute me." Ethan nodded slowly. "So, you're doing pretty well for yourself." She gave a small, sad smile. "You could say that, but success doesn't always mean happiness." Something in her tone caught him off guard. That flicker of loneliness again, the same one he'd seen in her eyes that night. Before he could say anything, Mia tugged at Clara's sleeve. "Do you want to see our fort?" Clara blinked, surprised. Your fort?" Lily pointed proudly toward the backyard, where a crooked wooden structure stood, a mess of blankets, sticks, and imagination. Ethan chuckled. "They call it their princess castle." "Can I?" Clara asked, looking at him. He shrugged. If you're brave enough to enter the kingdom. The twins grabbed her hands and led her across the yard, giggling all the way. Ethan stood back, arms crossed, watching as Clara crouched down to fit inside the tiny structure, laughing along with them. For a woman who probably lived in penthouses and boardrooms, she looked happy. Completely, freely happy. When they finally emerged, Mia handed Clara a daisy crown they'd made. "It's for you," she said proudly. "You our new queen." Clara gasped theatrically. "A queen? I'm honored." Ethan couldn't help but smile. The way his daughters adored her already was both heartwarming and terrifying. As the afternoon sun began to dip, he offered her coffee. They sat on the porch, watching the girls chase each other around the yard. "I don't usually do this," Clara said quietly. "Show up at people's homes. But after what you did, I couldn't just send a thank you card." Ethan looked down at his coffee. "You don't owe me anything, Clara." "I know," she said softly. "But maybe I owe myself the chance to thank you in person." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the air thick with something unspoken, the kind of feeling that lingers between two people who've shared a moment they can't quite explain. Finally, Clara stood. "I should go, but would it be all right if I came by again sometime?" Ethan hesitated, then smiled faintly. "You'd make two little girls very happy if you did." Clara's smile brightened. "Then I'll see you soon, Ethan." As her car drove off down the road, Ethan watched the taillights fade into the horizon, wondering how a single night in the rain had somehow brought her into their lives. And deep down, he couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning. Because Clara Hart, the woman he thought he'd rescued, might just be the one who would rescue him and his daughters in return. The next weekend came with golden sunshine and a breeze that carried the scent of spring. Ethan had almost convinced himself that Clara wouldn't return, that she'd driven back to her world of glass towers and luxury, where people like him didn't belong. But then, as he tightened a bolt under a rusty old pickup, a familiar voice floated through the air. "Is this where the town's most famous mechanic works?" He hit his head on the underside of the truck and groaned. "You again?" Clara laughed softly, standing a few steps away, holding a basket. "I brought lunch." Inside, there were sandwiches, coffee, and a small cake. The twins peeked from behind the house, whispering and giggling. "Daddy," Mia whispered loudly. The pretty lady came back. Ethan sighed, brushing the grease off his hands. "You didn't have to bring all this, Clara." "I wanted to," she said. "I figured you've probably eaten enough gas station sandwiches for one lifetime." He chuckled. "You're not wrong." They sat together on the porch again, this time with the twins joining in, crumbs and laughter scattering everywhere. Clara's laughter blended with theirs so easily, it was as if she had always been part of the family. After lunch, she helped the girls paint rocks to decorate their castle. Her beige coat was soon splattered with pink, green, and glitter, and she didn't seem to care one bit. When Lily accidentally dropped a paintbrush, Clara bent down, gently wiping the paint off her tiny hands. "You remind me of my mom," Lily murmured. The words hit Clara like a whisper from another world. For a moment, her smile faltered, then she pulled Lily into a soft hug. "That's the sweetest thing anyone's ever told me." Ethan watched quietly from the porch, his chest tightening. He hadn't seen his daughters open up like that in years. Since their mother passed, it had always been just the three of them, a world of quiet dinners, bedtime stories, and a father doing his best to fill a mother's shoes. And somehow, in just a few days, this stranger had slipped right into the empty spaces of their hearts. As the sun dipped lower, Clara helped Ethan pack away the paint. "They are wonderful kids," she said softly. "They're my whole world," Ethan replied. She smiled faintly. "You're a good father." "Trying to be," he said. "Some days it feels like I'm just holding everything together with duct tape and prayer." Clara laughed quietly. Duct tape can fix almost anything. But sometimes, even the strongest people need someone to hold them together. Their eyes met, just for a second, but long enough for both of them to look away. That evening, Clara stayed for dinner. She helped the girls set the table, insisting on washing the dishes afterward despite Ethan's protests. The small house, once quiet, now hummed with the kind of warmth Ethan hadn't felt in years. Later, after the girls went to bed, they sat by the porch again, stars scattered across the sky, crickets humming in the distance. "I like it here," Clara admitted softly. "It's peaceful, real." Ethan smiled. "You mean slow?" She shook her head. "No, I mean honest. In the city, everything feels like a competition. But here, I can breathe." He leaned back in his chair. "Funny, most people can't wait to leave this town. Maybe they never stopped long enough to see what they had." Her words hung in the air, soft, thoughtful, sincere. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed to slow, the sound of the wind through the trees filling the quiet. Then Clara stood, brushing her hair back. "I should go. It's getting late." Ethan nodded. "Drive safe, all right." She smiled. "I will." But before she reached her car, Lily's sleepy voice called from the doorway. "Miss Clara, can you come again tomorrow?" Clara turned, her heart melting. "Of course, sweetheart." Ethan just smiled, shaking his head as he watched her car disappear down the road. He didn't know what this was, or where it was heading, but for the first time in a long time, life didn't feel so heavy anymore. A week passed. Clara began visiting almost every other day. Sometimes she'd help Mia with her reading homework. Other times she'd cook dinner while Ethan worked in the garage. The small town started noticing. Neighbors whispered, curious about the elegant woman in designer coats spending afternoons with the mechanic's family. One day, Ethan found Clara sitting under the big oak tree behind the house, watching the twins play with a thoughtful expression. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About how easy it is to lose yourself chasing the wrong kind of life," she said. "For years I thought success meant having more money, more clients, more things. But this..." She gestured toward the girls running through the grass. "This feels like what happiness should look like." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he said the only thing that came naturally. "Then maybe you were meant to find it here." Clara turned to him, and this time, her smile was real. "Maybe I was." That evening, she stayed to tuck the twins in. Mia asked her to read a bedtime story, and Clara's voice was soft, melodic, filled with warmth. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching silently, something in his chest tightening again. When Clara finished the story, both girls were fast asleep, their little hands clutching the dolls she'd given them. Ethan whispered, "You're good with them." Clara turned. "They make it easy." As they stepped outside, the porch light flickered gently. The silence between them felt deeper this time. Not awkward, just charged. Ethan cleared his throat. "You ever miss your life in the city?" Clara looked out into the dark. "Sometimes, but it doesn't feel like home anymore." "Then where does?" She looked up at him, eyes shimmering under the porch light. "Maybe I'm still trying to figure that out." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. The night air, the stars, the hum of the earth. Ethan wanted to say something, but before he could, Clara's phone buzzed. Her expression changed, the softness fading into something else. I have to go," she said quickly, slipping the phone into her coat pocket. He nodded, though confusion flickered in his eyes. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," she said, forcing a smile. "Just work. I'll explain later." And just like that, she was gone, taillights fading into the night again. But that evening, as Ethan closed the door and looked at the sleeping faces of his daughters, a quiet thought lingered in his mind. Clara Hart wasn't just anyone. There was more to her, something he didn't yet understand. And soon, he was about to find out exactly who she really was. The next morning felt unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that settled into a home when something, or someone, was missing. Ethan poured himself a cup of coffee and stared out the kitchen window. Clara hadn't called. No texts, no visits, not even a quick message to say she'd made it home. The twins noticed it too. "Daddy," Mia asked, spooning her cereal, "is Miss Clara mad at us?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Of course not, honey. She's just busy." But inside, a faint unease had started to grow. That evening, After putting the girls to bed, Ethan found himself sitting on the porch again, staring at the empty road that led out of town. He told himself it didn't matter, that Clara could come and go as she pleased. She wasn't his responsibility. And yet, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next day, a sleek black car rolled into his driveway. For a second, Ethan thought Clara had returned. But when the door opened, a man in a tailored suit stepped out, sunglasses reflecting the sunlight. "Ethan Brooks," the man asked, his tone firm but polite. Ethan nodded slowly, wiping grease from his hands. "That's me. Can I help you?" The man opened a small leather folder, flashing a badge. "My name is William Cooper. I'm with Hart Enterprises' Private Security Division." Ethan frowned. "Hart Enterprises?" "Yes," the man said. "We're looking for Clara Hart. She's been missing since yesterday evening." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. "Missing?" Ethan repeated. "You mean, she's gone?" "Her car was found on the edge of Route 14, Cooper explained. "Engine still running. No sign of her." Ethan's stomach tightened. "What are you saying happened to her?" "We're not sure," Cooper said carefully. "But if she made contact with you recently, it's important that you tell us." Ethan hesitated, mind racing. He thought about their last conversation, the way her face changed when she got that phone call, the sudden urgency in her voice. "I saw her last night," he admitted. "She got a call, said it was work, and left." Cooper nodded, jotting something down. "Did she say where she was going?" "No," Ethan said. "But she looked scared." That word made the man pause. He exchanged a quick look with his driver. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. If you hear from her, call this number immediately." As the car disappeared down the road, Ethan stood there for a long time, the card heavy in his hand. Clara Hart. He finally knew her full name. He pulled out his phone, typing it into a search bar. Within seconds, dozens of results appeared. Magazine covers, business articles, charity events. Clara Hart wasn't just anyone. She was the CEO of Hart Enterprises, one of the largest real estate and investment firms in the country. A billionaire. Ethan leaned back in his chair, stunned. The woman who painted rocks with his daughters was one of the wealthiest people in America. He felt foolish for not realizing it sooner. The way she spoke, the car she drove, the subtle grace in everything she did. But what confused him most wasn't her money. It was why. Why had she shown up on that snowy night? Why had she stayed? And why did it hurt so much that she was gone? 2 days passed. The girls missed her terribly. They drew pictures for her, left them on the porch so she could see them when she comes back. Ethan didn't have the heart to tell them that maybe she wasn't coming back at all. That night, as he was locking up the shop, headlights appeared in the distance. His pulse jumped. The same black car. But this time, when the door opened, it wasn't Cooper who stepped out. It was her, Clara. She looked exhausted, her eyes red, her hair tied back hastily. "Clara," he breathed, walking toward her. "You're okay." "I'm fine," she said softly. "I had to disappear for a while. Things got complicated." Ethan frowned. "Complicated how?" She looked away. "Someone at my company was stealing money, millions. I found out and confronted them. Next thing I knew, my brakes failed on the highway." His jaw tightened. "You're saying someone tried to?" She nodded. "Yes. That's why my car was found on the roadside. I barely got out before it hit the guardrail." Ethan stepped closer, anger flashing in his eyes. "You should have told me." "I didn't want to drag you or the girls into it," she said. "You've already done enough." "Enough," he repeated, incredulous. "You think saving your life once was enough for me to stop caring?" The words came out sharper than he intended, and for a second, the air between them trembled. Clara's eyes softened. "Ethan," he exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, you don't have to explain everything right now. You're safe here. That's what matters." She nodded, tears glistening. "I didn't know where else to go." "Then you came to the right place," he said quietly. "You always do." Later that night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Clara sat by the fireplace, staring into the flames. Ethan joined her, a mug of coffee in hand. So, he said softly, Clara Hart. Billionaire, philanthropist, runaway CEO. I feel like I should be calling you more something. She smiled faintly. Please don't. I'm still just Clara. He studied her for a moment. Why didn't you tell me? Because for once in my life, I wanted someone to see me, not my name, not my money. She looked at him. And you did. Ethan's chest tightened. Clara, you could have been anyone, and I'd still. He stopped himself, the words hanging unspoken in the air. She looked up. You'd still what? He swallowed. Still care about you. For a long moment, she didn't respond. Then, softly, she reached across the small space between them, her hand finding his. I've been surrounded by people my whole life, she whispered. But I've never felt less alone than I do here, with you. The fire crackled. The world outside was silent. And for the first time, Ethan didn't fight what he was feeling. He leaned closer, his forehead resting gently against hers. No words, no promises, just understanding. A quiet, fragile connection that neither of them could ignore anymore. But peace never lasted long for Clara Hart. The next morning, her phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Her heart sank as she read the message. We know where you are. Her hands trembled. Ethan noticed instantly. What is it? Clara hesitated, then showed him the phone. His jaw clenched. You're not safe here anymore. I can't keep running, she said. If I disappear again, they'll come after you too. Then we fight, he said firmly. You're not alone in this. Tears welled up in her eyes. Why do you care so much? Because, he said quietly, some people are worth the fight. That night, as the storm rolled in again, rain lashing the windows, wind howling through the trees, Ethan stood guard by the window, determined to protect her and his daughters. Clara sat near the fireplace, holding the twins close, whispering stories to calm them. And in that fragile, flickering light, it hit her. Money, power, fame, none of it mattered. For the first time, she didn't feel like a CEO or target. She felt like a mother, like a woman who had finally found a home. Outside, thunder roared. Inside, the fire glowed softly around the four of them. A small family, built not by blood or wealth, but by kindness, courage, and love. And somewhere deep inside her, Clara Hart made a silent promise. She would never run again. Not from fear, not from danger, and definitely not from the man who had taught her what home truly meant. Morning came in gray streaks of rain. The small house felt heavier now, like the storm outside had seeped into its walls. Ethan moved quietly through the kitchen, the weight of the night still pressing on him. Clara sat at the table, phone clutched in her hand, unread messages lighting the screen like warnings she didn't want to see. Whoever they are, Ethan said, his voice calm but unshakable, they are not getting near you or the girls. Clara looked up, her eyes tired but fierce. Ethan, they know who you are now. I can't let you risk your family for me. He leaned across the table. You didn't let me risk anything. I chose this. You saved me the night I found you on that road, even if you don't see it yet. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the rain against the glass. Then headlights flashed outside, bright, deliberate, stopping right in front of the house. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He motioned Clara and the twins toward the back room. The front door creaked as he opened it a crack. Two men stood in the driveway, umbrellas in hand, their suits soaked but their postures stiff. Security, not danger. Mr. Brooks? One called. We're from Hart Enterprises. Ms. Hart's board sent us. Ethan's shoulders loosened, just slightly. Clara stepped forward cautiously. Ms. Hart, one man said, lowering his umbrella. The police traced the threats to your former CFO. He's been arrested. You're safe now. For a long moment, she didn't react. Then the tension that had lived in her eyes for weeks finally cracked. She turned to Ethan, and the relief on her face said everything. The men left soon after, the black SUV fading into the storm. Clara stood in the doorway, silent, the wind tugging at her hair. You're safe, Ethan murmured behind her. She nodded, voice trembling. Because of you. That evening, calm returned to the little house. The girls sat on the living room floor, drawing as usual, the laughter filling the space that used to echo. Clara joined them, her designer blouse rolled at the sleeves, her hands speckled with crayon color. She looked up at Ethan and smiled, a real one this time. "Did you ever think your life would end up like this?" she asked. He chuckled. "Not in a million years." "Funny choice of words," she teased softly, "considering you saved a millionaire." He grinned. "Guess money's not what makes someone worth saving." Her smile faded into something deeper. "Then what does?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "The way they make your world quieter, even when everything else is loud." Days turned into weeks. The storm passed. And slowly, Clara's old world began to knock again. Calls from lawyers, invitations to meetings, interviews begging for her side of the story. One morning, as she stood on the porch, she told Ethan, "They want me to come back, to take control again." He tried to smile, but his heart sank. "That's good. You deserve it." She looked down. "But I don't want to go back to who I was. Not completely." "Then don't," he said gently. "Build something new." She nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. "Would you help me?" He stepped closer. "Always." A year later, the same porch, now bathed in sunlight instead of snow. A sign hung over the rebuilt diner downtown, Hart and Brooks Cafe. Inside, laughter and coffee steam filled the air. Clara worked behind the counter, her hair tied back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The twins carried plates to smiling customers. Ethan tuned the radio and fixed the creaky shelf by the window. Their lives had become beautifully ordinary, and that, in itself, was extraordinary. When a customer recognized Clara and whispered, "Isn't that the billionaire from the news?" Ethan just smiled. "She used to be," he said. "Now she's family." Clara overheard, glancing his way, that same look of quiet gratitude in her eyes. Outside, sunlight spilled across the street where their story had begun. A road once cold and lonely, now warm and full of life. Sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with the biggest houses or the fullest accounts. They're the ones who give their hearts, even when they are scared to. And sometimes, home isn't where you were born. It's the place where someone stayed, when they didn't have to. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, so you never miss the next one.